have seen this image before. A goat-headed figure, seated in perfect stillness. One hand points upward, and the other points downward. A torch burns between its horns. A pentagram shines on its forehead. Its body is neither fully male nor fully female. Its wings suggest assent. Its animal face suggests instinct. And its expression seems to say something ancient without using a single word. For many people, this is the face of evil. But what if almost everything people think they know about Baphomet is incomplete? What if Baphomet was never simply a demon, never simply a pagan god, and never simply a satanic idol? What if Baphomet is something much stranger? A historical accusation, an occult diagram, an alchemical formula, a mirror of human contradiction, and one of the most misunderstood symbols in Western esotericism. Because the real history of Baphomet does not begin with a goat-headed statue. It begins with fear, war, religion, secret trials, forced confessions, hidden symbols, and the eternal human struggle to reconcile heaven and earth. And by the end of this video, the image that once looked like a monster may begin to look like something else entirely. A map. To understand Baphomet, we have to begin by removing the first illusion. Baphomet is not an ancient pagan god under that name. There was no known temple in Greece, Egypt, Rome, or Babylon where priests worshipped a deity called Baphomet. There is no classical mythology where Baphomet appears as part of a divine pantheon. The famous goat-headed figure that dominates the modern imagination is not ancient. It was drawn in the 19th century by the French occultist Eliphas Levi, so already the first mystery appears. If Baphomet is not an ancient god, why does the image feel so ancient? The answer is that Baphomet is not just one symbol. It is a gathering of symbols. It is a body built from fragments, medieval heresy, pagan animal imagery, Christian fear, alchemical polarity, Hermetic philosophy, Kabbalistic balance, and modern rebellion. The name itself seems to emerge from the shadowy border between Christianity and Islam during the Middle Ages. Some scholars have argued that the word Baphomet may have been a medieval distortion of Muhammad, a European rendering of Muhammad. In some medieval Christian texts, especially during and after the Crusades, Islam was often misunderstood and demonized. The word Baphomet may have originally been less of a god and more of an accusation, a confused symbol of the religious other. And this matters because Baphomet was born not from worship, but from suspicion. The most famous historical appearance of Baphomet comes from the trials of the Knights Templar. The Templars were founded in the early 12th century after the First Crusade as a military religious order sworn to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. Over time, they became powerful, wealthy, and politically influential. They owned lands, castles, fleets, and financial networks across Europe. They answered directly to the Pope, which made them unusually independent from kings. And by the early 14th century, that independence had become dangerous. King Philip IV of France was deeply in debt to the Templars. He also wanted to strengthen royal power and eliminate rivals. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, the Templars in France were arrested. What followed was one of the most infamous trials in medieval history. They were accused of denying Christ, spitting on the cross, practicing obscene rites, and worshipping a mysterious idol or head called Baphomet. But the details were chaotic. Some testimonies described a bearded head. Others described a skull. Some spoke of a cat. Some said they had never seen anything at all. Many confessions were obtained under torture, and historians like Malcolm Barber and Peter Partner have shown how politically charged and unreliable these proceedings were. This is one of the most important things to understand. The Templar Baphomet was not the goat-headed figure we know today. There is no solid evidence that the medieval Templars worshipped Levi's Baphomet. That image did not exist yet. The Templar Baphomet was an accusation wrapped in fear, pressure, and political ambition. But that does not mean the mystery is meaningless, because symbols often grow stronger when history fails to define them. The Templars may have had internal initiation rituals, like many closed orders. They may have used symbolic tests of obedience or secrecy. But the claim that they collectively worshipped a demonic goat idol is historically weak. Their last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned in 1314, and the order was destroyed. Yet the name Baphomet survived. And this is where the story becomes stranger. A word born in accusation began to attract older images around itself. Long before Baphomet, humanity imagined horned beings as symbols of the wild, the fertile, the dangerous, and the sacred. In ancient Greece, Pan was the goat-footed god of wilderness, music, sexuality, panic, and untamed nature. His presence was not evil in the modern sense, it was overwhelming. Pan represented the part of life that civilization cannot fully control: desire, instinct, music, animal fear, and the sacred terror of the forest. The satyrs and fauns of the ancient world carried similar meanings. They were not devils. They were liminal beings, standing between human and animal, culture and wilderness, reason and appetite. In Celtic iconography, figures like Cernunnos appear horned, often associated with animals, abundance, and the living forces of nature. Modern writers sometimes exaggerate the continuity between ancient horned gods and later occult symbols, and historians like Ronald Hutton have warned us to be careful with those connections. But the symbolic pattern is real. Horns often represented vitality, power, fertility, and contact with the non-human world. Then Christianity changed the symbolic atmosphere. As Christianity spread through Europe, many older pagan images were reinterpreted. Horns, hooves, animal bodies, ecstatic rites, and fertility symbols increasingly became associated with demons, temptation, and the devil. The old gods did not simply disappear. Many of them were absorbed, inverted, or demonized. This is why Baphomet feels older than its historical form. It wears the mask of ancient nature, but it speaks through medieval fear and modern occultism. The Great Transformation happened in the 19th century. In 1854 and 1856, Eliphas Levi published Dogme et Rituel de la Haute Magie, or Dogma, and Ritual of High Magic. In it, he presented the image that would define Baphomet forever: the Sabbatic goat. But Levi was not simply drawing Satan, he was creating a symbolic synthesis. In Levi's image, every detail matters. The goat head represents the animal principle, instinct, vitality, and the raw forces of nature. But between the horns burns a torch. This is not random decoration. The torch is intelligence, illumination, spiritual fire rising above the animal mind. On the forehead appears the pentagram, traditionally associated in Western esotericism with the microcosm, the human being as a living temple of the 5 principles: earth, water, air, fire, and spirit. In its upright form, it often represents spirit governing the elements. In Baphomet, it suggests that even the animal form is crowned by spiritual order. The arms bear the words Solve and Coagula. This is the language of alchemy. Solve means dissolve. Coagula means coagulate, recombine, and bring into form. In spiritual alchemy, transformation requires both movements. Something must be broken down, purified, and stripped of false identity. Then something new must be formed, integrated, and embodied. This is not just chemistry. It is the drama of the soul. Every real transformation begins with a kind of dissolution. The person you thought you were begins to crack. Your old certainties lose power. Your false purity fails. Then, if you can endure the process, a deeper self begins to take shape. Baphomet displays this formula on its own body. One hand points upward, one hand points downward. This immediately recalls the Hermetic principle often summarized as above, so below. The universe above and the human being below mirror each other. The macrocosm and the microcosm are linked. Heaven is reflected in earth, and earth is not separate from heaven. This is where Baphomet becomes more than a frightening image. It becomes a diagram of correspondence. The wings suggest ascent. The goat body suggests descent into nature. The breasts and masculine features suggest androgyny, the union of masculine and feminine. The lunar symbols around the figure suggest polarity, waxing and waning, increase and decrease, active and receptive. And in the center, near the generative region, Levi placed the caduceus, a symbol of intertwined forces, healing, polarity, and subtle energy. In an occult reading, this can suggest that spiritual power is not produced by denying the body, but by transmuting the forces that move through it. This is why reducing Baphomet to evil misses the point. Levi's Baphomet is a symbol of equilibrium. Terrifying, yes. Ambiguous, absolutely. But not simple. And perhaps that is exactly why the image became so powerful. Because human beings often fear symbols that refuse to choose one side. Baphomet is animal and angelic, male and female, above and below, light and shadow, sacred and profane, human and non-human. It sits at the crossing, point of opposites. In my opinion, this is where Baphomet becomes genuinely interesting. Not as an object of worship, not as a Halloween monster, but as a warning against spiritual simplification. Because many people want spirituality to be clean, bright, comfortable, and separate from the body. But Baphomet says no real transformation happens by pretending the lower half of existence does not exist. The alchemist does not throw away the prima materia, the raw material. The alchemist transforms it. This connects Baphomet to a very old idea within the perennial philosophy. The belief that beneath the surface differences of traditions, there are recurring spiritual patterns. One of those patterns is the reconciliation of opposites. In Hermeticism, the above and below correspond. In alchemy, the king and queen unite. In Kabbalah, the tree of life is balanced between pillars of severity and mercy, expansion and restriction. In Taoism, yin and yang are not enemies, but complementary forces. In Gnostic traditions, the human being is trapped in ignorance until a deeper knowledge awakens within. In Christian esotericism, the descent into darkness can become part of redemption. Different languages, different symbols, different cosmologies. But again and again, the same question appears. How does the divided human being become whole? Baphomet offers one disturbing answer: by facing what has been rejected. This does not mean indulging every impulse. It does not mean worshipping instinct blindly. It means recognizing that what we call darkness is often energy we have not understood yet. This is why some modern interpreters connect Baphomet with the psychological idea of the shadow, especially as developed by Carl Jung. The shadow is not simply evil. It is the part of the psyche that the conscious identity refuses to recognize. Sometimes it contains aggression, fear, envy, or desire. But sometimes it also contains creativity, courage, vitality, and truth. When the shadow is denied, it becomes dangerous. When it is integrated, it becomes power. Baphomet, seen through this lens, is not telling us to become monstrous. It is showing us that what we refuse to understand may eventually rule us from the unconscious. And this is why the symbol has always been attractive to initiatory traditions. But here, we have to be precise. Baphomet is often linked to secret societies, especially the Templars, Freemasonry, the OTO, and modern occult orders. Some of these links are historical, others are exaggerated. Some are symbolic, others are products of conspiracy literature. The Templar connection is the oldest, but also the most uncertain. The medieval accusations mention Baphomet, but they do not prove the existence of a coherent cult of the goat-headed figure. The Masonic connection is even more complicated. Regular Freemasonry does not worship Baphomet. The idea that Masons secretly adore Baphomet comes largely from anti-Masonic propaganda, polemical literature, and later, occult speculation. Freemasonry does use symbols of light, architecture, death, rebirth, moral refinement, and sacred geometry. But Baphomet is not a central Masonic object of worship. Still, the association persists because Baphomet belongs to the same symbolic atmosphere that fascinates many esoteric currents: initiation, secrecy, polarity, hidden knowledge, and transformation. In the 19th and 20th centuries, occultists began to read Baphomet not as a literal idol, but as a symbolic key. Aleister Crowley, one of the most controversial figures in modern occultism, took the magical name Baphomet in connection with his role in the Ordo Templi Orientis. This does not mean Crowley was simply worshipping the goat. In the context of ceremonial magic and thelema, names often function as masks, formulas, and symbolic identities. For Crowley, Baphomet could represent the union of opposites: magical force, initiatory transgression, and the movement beyond conventional morality. Thelema itself centers on the discovery and fulfillment of true will, not on Baphomet as a deity. But the image fits the thelemic taste for symbols that shock the ordinary mind and force it beyond inherited fear. And this reveals something important about occult symbolism. A symbol that frightens the uninitiated may be used by the initiate as a tool of awakening. Not because fear itself is holy, but because fear reveals where consciousness is still conditioned. This is also why Baphomet appears again and again in modern esoteric art, magical orders, music, cinema, games, and countercultural imagery. It is a symbol that refuses domestication. Every age projects something onto it. For medieval Christianity, Baphomet was heresy. For 19th century occultism, Baphomet was equilibrium. For modern Satanism, Baphomet became rebellion. For conspiracy culture, Baphomet became hidden control. For artists, Baphomet became forbidden beauty. For serious students of symbolism, Baphomet became a question. And now we arrive at the modern satanic association. In the 20th century, especially through the Church of Satan, the goat head inside the inverted pentagram became widely recognized as the sigil of Baphomet. This image is not identical to Levi's seated figure, but it draws from the same goat symbolism and intensifies the connection with satanic identity. In this modern context, Baphomet often represents opposition to religious authority, individualism, carnality, skepticism toward moral hypocrisy, and the rejection of imposed guilt. For many modern Satanists, especially in non-theistic forms, Satan and Baphomet are not literal supernatural beings. They are symbols of rebellion, autonomy, and resistance against religious domination. This is why public statues of Baphomet in recent decades have caused such intense controversy. The image carries centuries of fear. Even when used as a political or legal symbol for religious pluralism, people react as if something ancient and dangerous has entered the public square. But that reaction tells us as much about culture as it does about Baphomet. Because Baphomet has become a screen for projection, people see in it what they already fear. Some see the devil, some see liberation, some see occult wisdom, some see blasphemy, some see psychological integration, some see a symbol that should never have left the shadows. And maybe that is the secret of its survival. Baphomet is not powerful because everyone agrees on what it means. It is powerful because no one fully agrees. This is where the symbol becomes deeply human. Every person carries an inner conflict between what they show and what they hide, what they call spiritual and what they call shameful, what they accept and what they exile. Baphomet gathers these opposites into one impossible body and simply sits there, silent, forcing the observer to react. When I first understood this, Baphomet stopped looking like a monster to me. It started looking like a mirror placed in a dark room. Not a comfortable mirror, not a safe mirror, but one that asks this question: what part of reality are you still refusing to include in your idea of the sacred? And that question appears in many traditions. The Hermeticist asks how the human being reflects the cosmos. The alchemist asks how lead becomes gold. The Kabbalist asks how opposing forces are balanced on the tree of life. The mystic asks how the divine can be present in a broken world. The Gnostic asks why the soul sleeps inside matter. And Baphomet, in its own unsettling way, asks this: can you unite what you have divided? This is also why the image is dangerous when misunderstood. If someone sees Baphomet only as permission to glorify instinct, they miss the torch. If someone sees only the torch and rejects the animal, they miss the body. If someone sees only darkness, they miss the balance. If someone sees only rebellion, they miss the discipline. The symbol is not saying everything is allowed. It is saying everything must be understood. That is a very different message. True esoteric symbols are not decorations. They are compressed teachings. They do not reveal everything at once. They open according to the depth of the person looking at them. To the fearful mind, Baphomet is a demon. To the rebellious mind, Baphomet is freedom. To the occult mind, Baphomet is polarity. To the alchemical mind, Baphomet is transformation. To the contemplative mind, Baphomet is the mystery of unity, hidden inside contradiction. And this brings us back to the beginning. A goat-headed figure, a torch between the horns, one hand above, one hand below. Solve and Coagula, male and female, beast and angel, moon and fire, matter and spirit. The image looks chaotic only until you realize that every part is arranged around one idea. Equilibrium. Baphomet is not merely a being. It is a formula. The raw forces of life must not be worshipped blindly, but they also must not be denied. The spiritual light must not become hatred of the body. The body must not become a prison for consciousness. The masculine and feminine must not remain at war. Heaven and earth must not be imagined as enemies. In that sense, Baphomet is one of the most misunderstood symbols in the Western esoteric tradition, because it stands exactly where most systems become uncomfortable, at the threshold where opposites must be reconciled. And maybe this is why the symbol still feels alive, not because it belongs to the past, but because modern people are more divided than ever. We separate body from spirit, science from meaning, religion from experience, nature from civilization, reason from intuition, masculine from feminine, light from shadow. Then we wonder why the soul feels fragmented. Baphomet returns as an image of that fragmentation gathered into one form, not healed automatically, not purified instantly, but confronted. So when people ask, what is Baphomet really? The most honest answer is layered. Historically, Baphomet was a mysterious name tied to medieval accusations against the Templars. Iconographically, Baphomet is a modern occult image created by Eliphas Levi. Symbolically, Baphomet is the union of opposites. Alchemically, Baphomet is Solve et Coagula, dissolution and reintegration. Psychologically, Baphomet is the shadow demanding recognition. Culturally, Baphomet is rebellion against religious fear. Spiritually, Baphomet is a disturbing reminder that the sacred may not look the way we expect. And this is why the image survived the destruction of the Templars, the rise of occultism, the birth of modern Satanism, and the endless recycling of symbols in popular culture. Because Baphomet is not just an answer. It is a test. It tests whether we can look beyond inherited fear. It tests whether we can distinguish history from myth, symbol from superstition, and depth from sensationalism. It tests whether we can face the uncomfortable possibility that the monster at the edge of the temple may be guarding a truth we were not ready to see. So now I want to ask you something. After everything we explored, what do you think Baphomet truly represents? Evil, balance, rebellion, hidden wisdom, or the shadow of the human soul? Write your answer in the comments, because with a symbol like this, the interpretation often reveals as much about the observer as it does about the symbol. And if this explanation helped you see beyond the surface of Baphomet, leave a like. It tells the algorithm that serious esoteric content, treated with depth instead of fear, still has a place here. In the end, perhaps Baphomet was never simply the face of evil. Perhaps Baphomet became terrifying because it gathered into one image everything humanity tried to separate. The animal we deny, the spirit we seek, the body we shame, the light we worship, The darkness we project, the masculine and feminine we divide, the heaven above and the earth below. And there it remains, silent, seated between worlds, not asking to be worshipped, not asking to be hated, only asking to be understood. So subscribe to the channel, share this video with someone who loves hidden history and sacred symbolism, and watch the playlist appearing on the screen now. Because the next symbol may seem completely different from Baphomet, but in the esoteric tradition, every true symbol eventually leads back to the same mystery, the hidden architecture of the human soul.